Welcome to Design Systems Community Meetup 17. That's right, we've had more than one. Welcome to the Wealthsimple office. Glad to see you here, and let's go. Today's event is Design Systems Journeys, featuring talks representing Shopify and Wealthsimple. Today is June 19, 2023. And since we're in the city of Toronto, let's begin with a land acknowledgement. The land I'm standing on today is the traditional territory of many nations, including the Mississaugas of the Credit, the Anishinaabeg, the Chippewa, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples, and is now home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. I also acknowledge that Toronto is covered by Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit, and the Williams Treaty, signed with multiple Mississaugas and Chippewa bands. Our code of conduct is to respect each other, keep it legal, play nice, and uphold our code of conduct available at our website, designsystems.community. Also, please protect your privacy. Some essentials. In case you haven't had a slice, there's some over there. Restrooms are just around the corner, and please be respectful of the place. You're doing a great job already, no problem. And if you need anything, you can come to the volunteers or anyone wearing this shirt. Except for... Who are we? Well, we are the Design System Community Chapter Toronto co-organizers. My name is Enrico Sacchetti. I'm a software developer by trade.
Hi, everyone. I'm Lucy, design manager at Shopify.
Hey, everyone. I'm PM on the crypto team at Wealthsimple, and excited to have all of you here. We have two more chapter leads who just joined us recently, Donna and Ed. They're both actually sick, so they were not able to make it. But you're going to see them as we do more meetups. But yeah, thanks for coming.
Thank you. Now let's go over our values. Number one, accessibility. We are all design systems practitioners and enthusiasts. We care about this first and foremost. 2, diversity and inclusivity. 3, community and sharing. 4, customer focus, working backwards from the user experience. And collaborative working. Finally, bridging content, design, and code. Everyone here is welcome to be here. Doesn't matter what your expertise are in, because you all play a role in digital design systems and accessibility. And last but not least, fun with, or fun. We're also growing. Did you know that this chapter has over 2,000 members on meetup.com? How did we get here? Thank you for that. We're also growing globally. We have several chapters around the world, such as in Berlin and Czechia and Bay Area, San Francisco, and also some other places coming up. You'll see. Thank you very much to our sponsor, Wrangle, who is representing us as a gold sponsor. And we also have a representative. Come on down.
Thank you. My name is Severin. I'm VP of Product Design at Wrangle, and as you can see at Wrangle, we partner with global brands, funded scale-ups to co-create and build next-generation products and digital experience platforms that will define the future. A mouthful, but we are very thrilled to be a sponsor here because we're very enthusiastic and passionate about design systems. And we take all our experience, and you might have seen Radius 1.0, which is our design system that we've published a couple of years back. In the last couple of years, we have also learned a tremendous amount about new designs, about design systems in general. And we're just about to release the next version of our Radius Accelerator Toolkit, which will include Figma, fully tokenized component library that is also paired with in-code components, has a demo site end-to-end. So we'll actually show it off with theming, light and dark themes, as well as different branding, how that all works. And that together will be available to anybody who comes to our site. So our site, if you don't know Wrangle.io, which I'm being fully branded on, or you want to use just a QR code over there, that's fantastic. The other things why we're excited to sponsor today is the two topics. The first topic with Kristen talking about the adoption of design systems is one of the topics that we hear an incredible amount off with all the clients that we work with. And if you haven't seen it, we have a little tool, and let's see whether she has incorporated that in her talk, called Radius Tracker, that allows us to actually see how components are integrated in consuming products, and what the adoption rate and the adoption tendency is. And the second talk, my design team is super excited and passionate when we talk about, should a design system restrict, or does it actually enable creativity? And I see Isan smiling back there, and that's one of the topics that Sarah will talk about today. So very, very cool topics that are really relevant to practically every client we work with. We have 2 locations, one in Amsterdam, one here in Toronto, with about 100 plus people, designers, developers, product managers, and if you're interested to work with us, talk to us, come visit the website.
Thank you, Severin.
So I'm just going to go over the agenda today. So we'll have our 2 speakers, and then we'll close at 7:40, and then you guys can hang out for 20 minutes, and then venue closes at 8. We'll have Q&A after each presentation. So without further ado, I'll introduce our first speaker, which is Sarah, senior software developer at Wealthsimple. Worked in tech since 2016. Before that, she was in nonprofit and immigrant and refugee serving sector. Before that, she was in nonprofit, immigrant, and refugee. So she has interest in drawing, sewing, and comics. And so her talk will be called Measuring Design System Adoption. And I'm just going over my notes to make sure I don't forget anything. How can we better measure design system adoption? Where can we learn about how to track components, usage, and why it's important? So welcome, Sarah.
Is this a good mic? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Sorry, just one second. Hi, I'm Sarah. Happy Pride, Juneteenth, Indigenous Heritage Month, I think, and Portuguese Heritage Month as well. I'm glad to be here. As mentioned, I started out working in the nonprofit sector. I am an immigrant, but I'm not a refugee, but I worked in the immigrant and refugee serving sector for a while. And then after that, I transitioned to working in tech. So I've worked in legal tech, health tech at TWG, RAP. And now I'm at Wealthsimple, and my manager is right there. You can say hello to Oralee. She's waving. Yeah. And since I've been at Wealthsimple, I've been working on enablement work. So I started out working on the platform team, which is, some companies call it like foundations teams, but it was the front end team that dealt with all the front end architecture, and then I moved to the design system team, which is self-explanatory for most folks here. And I'm on the engineering side of things, and we're a pretty small team, I'd say, 3 engineers, 3 designers. And I'm here to just talk a little bit about measuring design system adoption. And I'm going to present the Wealthsimple experience as a case study. So I'm not going to talk about it in a particularly broad way, but just more, this is what we've done. Hopefully you can learn from that. So I made some assumptions. This will be most relevant to folks who have a design system. If you have a UI kit already, and I mentioned that because maybe your design system is in a baby stage where you haven't fully fleshed out your UI toolkit, and it'll be most relevant if you have a code base that you are about to use your design system or already using your kit in. And by UI kit, I mean like a component library on the engineering side of things that is integrated with a design component library on the design side of things. So some existential questions. Why would you bother measuring your design system? The biggest reason is to continue to exist. So if you have been on a design system or existed near one, I'm sure you know that the biggest reason that companies are reluctant to invest in design systems work is because they need to prove a business case, and it's difficult to do so. Unlike feature work, you can't just there isn't a clear business case where you create a feature, it goes out to clients, and it translates directly into money. With design system work and enablement work in general, you kind of have to, the onus ends up falling on the people doing that kind of work to prove why it's necessary. So you might intuitively know that building a design system is important because you want coherence across the app, you want design and engineering to be working in sync together, and it'll make designers and engineers create feature work and get it done, build it faster. But you have to prove that in order to be able to get alignment on the leadership side. And so measuring is one way to do this. Unfortunately, it's the trickiest thing to measure because there's no one way of doing this. There are many ways, and there is like one key way, which is to try to figure out if it actually makes teams faster at delivering the things that the company wants them to deliver. But in order to do that, you need to be able to have insight into those teams, and they may not be your team. And so that is a very tricky piece. And then another reason for why bothering to measure is validation. Was this indeed the right solution to the problem that your company was facing? Another reason is for evaluation. So is it working? What is working? What is not working about it? And then the one that like surprised me the most, I think, as we went through a bit of our journey with like a migration from an older UI toolkit to a more comprehensive design system, was that measuring things actually keeps team spirits up. Like it's nice to be able to check a dashboard and be like, the numbers are going up or down. As silly as that sounds, that's become like the best part of my day. And it's very good at keeping people motivated to do the thing. So let me talk a bit about the design system at Wealthsimple. This is the design system maturity model that is built by Sparkbox. So I have a link there. You can't really see it, but you can look at the slides later. So it's got 4 different stages. Roughly, stage 1 is build the first version. That's when you release V1. And that's kind of when you might be deciding the technology that you're using, the component definition, the APIs, and then what tools or frameworks you're going to support. And then once you release V1, you move into growing adoption. So your focus is more on getting people to use what you released. And there's a lot of education and evangelism. And then once you get critical mass adoption, you go into the teenage years. And then that is everyone's using your design system. Now you have to enforce standards, and you feel like you're squashing creativity, and you need to prioritize things differently. And you're very firmly in the stage of, we need to assess the return on investment that we've made in this design system. And then once it becomes an external product in your company, you focus more on long-term sustainability and growth. Maybe you focus more on governance if you hadn't before, and you have highly evolved communication. So looking at this, I would say that the design system at Wealthsimple is firmly at the end of the growing adoption stage, and dealing with some of the teenage concerns of, is this the right return on investment? And we're getting to the stage where we are getting critical mass. And so measuring both what it means to have critical mass and the return on investment is where we're at. So in stage 2, which is growing adoption, they describe it as, once we have a working system, creators get excited to show its value. The easiest way to show a design system value is to show that people want to use it. And so, like I said, you may intuitively know that a design system is the answer to your problems, But if no one is using it, you've created it, no one's using it, what's the point of it? What was the point? And if you can't prove that anyone's using it, what was the point? So that's why this stage is clearly defined by the overwhelming sense of urgency to get other people to use it. And I would say also to measure that usage. And so I've found this really telling, which is not me. So this is really telling where it's you don't actually need as many metrics as you probably think, and that's true for us at Wealthsimple. What you need is enough metrics to help you tell a story about retaining or growing investment in the design system. And with that, we've mostly ended up looking into these two metrics, which is, are people using it and what is their experience using it? And I'd love to say that these metrics came out of a well thought out strategy session where we sat around when we thought deeply about this. But the reality is that this kind of work is extremely messy, and that's not how it came about. You might have experienced this in your work yourself. My manager is laughing because she knows. I think what happened with us was we actually did the reverse. We started collecting the data, and then this is what the outcome was. And we collected the data intuitively without realizing we were trying to hit these kinds of or answer these kinds of questions that concretely. So the first, so these were the two things. The first one was, are people using it? So this one was tricky. We started tracking whether or not people were using our design system right before we started going full speed ahead with the migration. And for the migration, we had an old component library we needed to migrate to our new design system. And so in order to track how our old component library was being used, GitHub Search had just released their beta. That's how long ago it was, like 6 months ago. And what I did was use this ridiculously long search query to search for every component that I could find and manually count it. So you can already tell from this that this is both painful and not a long-term solution, and just very manual. I mean, brute force works. That's why it's a thing you can do, but it's not a sustainable thing you can do. And one of the things about doing this is that I couldn't reasonably update this over time. So it took me like a few weeks to even collate all these numbers. And the second column of the spreadsheet that you can barely see is just the number of me counting the usage of every single component in each of these files and each of these repos. And so because we had already been collecting data months before the migration about our design system usage, what we ended up doing was updating that to also collect usage about our old component library. And I'm sorry that you can't actually really see this very well. But basically what this is we use a tool from Segment.io that's called Dependency Report. And what you do is you pass it the library that you want to search for imports for, and you pass it the code that you want it to search in. And so we basically got it to generate a total list for both the total number of components that were being used of our old library, the total number of our new library, and then disaggregate it per component and per area of code that it was happening in. And I'll show you a graph that showcases that. But what this ended up doing is that it just became infinitely better than a manual search. It's not a snapshot in time. We run this on a chronological job that runs like once a day. So we basically set it and forget it. And every time it runs, it sends data to Datadog. So we capture all of our historical data there. And then we end up with graphs like this, where clearly in the red or the pink on the left, that is the number of our design system components. And then on the right in the yellow are the number of our old UI kit. And that is the snapshot in time. That's like today. But we also have our time series on a line graph with a ridiculous few spikes where we decided to switch the way that we were collecting data. So this is never really like a clean process. I mean, maybe if it is for you, congratulations. But it certainly wasn't for us. We started collecting data where we counted the number of imports of specific components in in our code base. But what that actually ends up doing is not showing that maybe you import a component in one file and you use it 6 times versus importing it once and only using it once. And that actually gives you a very different perspective about how popular a component is, how frequently it's used, and where it's used. And then this is like the disaggregated data. So in each feature area of our, I can't really show you, but in each feature area of our app listed on the left column, and the top column is like a different component each time. It gives you a number for each time it's been used. And we use that to be able to kind of map out, we want to be able to migrate from one library to the other. What are the most popular components from the old UI kit that were being used? And then is that API simple enough to run a code mod on it? So code mods are a script that you write to modify more code. And then we basically pulled all of that data out to be able to just like run through a migration automatically, but also give teams insight into, in each area of your code, these are where the old code is being used. And this is where the old UI toolkit is being used. So these are the areas that you can these are the ones you can search for, and this is where you can handle it. We've handled like the easy ones, and we've marked them clearly below, but this gives folks a little bit more insight into what's happening in the code, because it's really difficult when you've got, we work with a mono repo. We used to have a micro UI setup, but now we have a mono repo and it's just massive. And so the other thing that we try to, actually, I had some more things to say. So how did this impact our work? Aside from helping us identify what to pick for migrations, it also helped us with motivation. So seeing these numbers go down daily was huge. This is the dashboard I open every single morning. And it also built trust in leadership because they could see the direct impact of our work. So they weren't constantly like wondering, hey, is the design system being used? How is it being used? Where is it being used? They didn't have to go into the code to look for that. They just looked at the dashboard and they could, like, the dashboard is pretty clearly marked and they could figure out, oh yeah, wow, the usage has gone up over time. And I would get messages from VPs being like, oh, hey, I looked at your dashboard today. Great work. Like the usage is going down or up. And it kind of reduced the uncertainty and built trust in our team, which is huge when you're, like I said, on an enablement team and you have to prove your worth constantly because people aren't seeing the translation of what you do directly into money. And the other thing we tried to capture was what are people's experiences using the design system. So ideally, you know, if we sat around with a strategy and went through it and tried to figure out how to tackle it, we would have probably put out a survey, but we forgot. And our engineering team also has a lot of survey fatigue. So we didn't end up going that route. Another area we could and probably will explore in the future is analyzing our on-call tickets. Our design system team has an on-call rotation where we help other engineers. And so we track every question that comes in and who's asking them, what team they're from, and who they're asking it to, whether it's the designers, engineers, or both of us. And we can probably extrapolate from that what their experience is using our design system. And at the moment, instead, we have a group of nice things people have said about us in Slack, which we collect screenshots of. I highly recommend. It's good for morale and also for presentations. But also, a lot of the things that come out of this have given us a little bit of insight because some of the folks writing in, most of them actually are not people that typically do front-end work in the company. And they've written in and said, hey, like the work that you've done has made it really easy for me to just create a screen. And I would have been harder for me to do it without having this design system here. And also your documentation is great. Everybody loves to hear that. Nobody likes to write documentation, but when you hear that like even one person has read it, it's huge. It's true. So some of the things that are on our mind next are things like quantitatively measuring this question, like the experience, like, is this actually making building features easier or faster? There's actually like a return on investment equation that you can do. and I linked to it here, so you can check that out. And then there's also contributions to the design system. Our design system, when it was built, had a lot of forethought put into it, in the sense that the contribution model was one of the first things that went out, so that contributions weren't a bottleneck. And that's picked up a lot in the engineering side of things. Our engineers help us fix bugs. They contribute new components when we don't have the capacity to do so. And it's been really great. So measuring the contribution from the design system to the design system would be another area to tackle. And that also includes from design. So I'll talk about that in a second. And then measuring custom components, like what kind of things are people building in the app that we don't know about but could be pulled into the design system. And also like measuring quality improvements, especially around accessibility and UI regressions. And then what's another thing on our mind next, which is what I just mentioned, which is this. Design system adoption really begins in the design phase. So if designers don't know that components exist, we shouldn't expect our engineers to know that either. And one thing that's tricky is measuring how components are used on the design side of things. So there are quite a few examples of how different teams have integrated with Figma to be able to pull that information out, or whatever design tool they're using. And that's an area that we're continuing to explore. Our design team is still getting used to the idea of a design system. They don't feel constrained by some of them. Most of them don't. 90% of them don't feel constrained by it yet, because I think they're still trying to figure out how to use it. And I think this would give us some insight into why it's tricky for them. So that's it. That's all I have. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Thank you so much. It's kind of poetic to see upward trending graphs on the Wealthsimple design system.
It's kind of what?
Poetic.
Poetic?
Upward trending graphs.
Oh, yeah, I know.
Wealth. If anyone in the audience has questions, please raise your hand and I will run to you. But for now, I guess I can do an icebreaker. Yes, question in the back.
All right. Thanks, Sarah. It was a great presentation, to be honest.
Thanks.
Well, probably I have a couple of questions, but I would like to know first, how do you manage the versioning of your design system? Because sometimes, or probably, you could have different versions of the components that you are creating in different parts of your applications, and probably teams are not up to date to those versions. How do you manage that in changes?
So we had a long conversation when the design system started up about how we would handle that. The team was pretty split on whether or not we wanted component level versioning or package level versioning. And at the time we had a micro UI architecture. So there were many different repos that we had to deal with. And so we landed on, we just wanted to have versioning on our entire design system versus having component level versioning. And that's where we've landed, but it doesn't mean that's where we'll stay. We have a mono repo, and we definitely see the value in component level versioning, because it has bitten us in the ass not having it in many ways. So sometimes the decisions we made are constrained by the architecture and made for us in that sense. So.
Okay, thank you. And the second one is, in terms of contributions, have you thought about using inner source, or what strategy have you considered to engage the contributions?
Yeah, I do. Actually, Orly, do you want to answer that? I do remember we had a conversation about inner source, but at the moment, what we're doing is we have a very stringent, like not stringent, we have a very comprehensive contribution guide. We ask developers to read it if they're going to make contributions. We put them through an extremely rigorous but well-meaning PR review. We don't make it difficult because we don't want contributions, but only just to assure quality, because it impacts the entire app when somebody makes a contribution. And that's basically how our contributions happen from the engineering side of things. So.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah, so to add to the contributions, we went for the hybrid way of like having everybody able to do it, but with a lot of constraint. So you have name constraint, you have indication of what you're doing it, the rationale about why you want that component, when you want to use it, other people can use it. If you can say yes to none of those questions, you can't contribute. So we allowing contribution, but not fully contribution as well. So if you can go through what we have as question for good components, feel free to join in and we can do it. The same thing, like you can't do any API you want. We have a strict API. So if any of those parts, you can just say yes and you have a way, then we have a hybrid model. If you just want to add a component because you think it is and it can be reused, that's not enough for us. So we still bring a lot of constraint even in that model.
To keep on the computation, oh my gosh, for the contributing model, who usually initializes it? Is it dev or is it design? Like, who's the one pushing to contribute to all this?
We've had a few different experiences. So sometimes it's design will be like, we need this to happen. And we'll say, we don't have capacity. And then we will ask the engineer on their team to take on the contribution. And their engineer will be like, okay, how long will it take? And we will say, long time. And they will say, that sucks, but I'll do it anyway. Or I won't do it. And then they'll contribute to the design system. I think we've had a few cases where the engineers were like, we need this. And so we get them to answer all of those questions. Like, is it appropriate for the design system? Is it, are you going to be able to write it in our very specific composable structure? Can you make it generalizable enough for everybody to be able to use it? Have you thought about all the use cases? Have you worked with the designer? Blah, blah, blah. So from both ways.
Sarah, you mentioned, or the way I understood is you measured mainly moving from one design system to another. Do you also measure variations of components that come up in consuming products, and if so, how?
Yeah, so I would say the primary place that we measure that is during either UX reviews or on-call. So it's not even something we measure, but those are the areas that we find out about them. So we will find out during UX review that someone's made a variation of something in the design system, and there will be a conversation about it, like especially around rationale, like why do we need this, and not in a bad way, like why do you need this, but in a why do you need this? Do we need to scale this? And then we'll hear about it when folks ping the on-call on Slack, being like, hey, can I get some feedback on this? And we're like, hey, where did this come from? Suspicious. And that's like when we find out about variations. When I mentioned the custom components, that was another thing we've had many conversations about tracking, which is we want to track in the app what kind of custom components people are building so that we can see if we can integrate them in. And you can use Segment.io for that, but we haven't gotten there yet. So.
Hey, Sarah.
Hey.
First of all, thank you for a great presentation. That was awesome. I have two questions, and maybe the first one will change a bit the way the second one is asked. But is your design system, I guess I'll say open source, or is it just internal to Wealthsimple at the moment?
It's internal at the moment.
Okay.
We've had a few discussions about making it open source at the very high level. Like, should we make it open source? We don't have time to think about that right now. That's the extent of our discussions, but desires have been expressed that's what we would like to do.
Well, I guess then that being the case, my second question is, how do you guys track which teams at Wealthsimple are using the design system? Like, is there a process, like an onboarding process with the design team maybe, where teams will come and say, we've been tasked to build such and such UI, or is it just kind of like, it's just up for grabs and teams can kind of grab the components that they need?
So the design system is available on any part of the app at the moment. So it's been installed on like every single part of the app. So any engineer who wants to use it can use it. And in fact, we found that we haven't had to have that much onboarding. Like, we find that people will just read the documentation, which is wild to me, coming from a team where nobody read any documentation and we had to automate everything. But people read the documentation. They're like, the documentation is great. Thanks. I got up and running. I'm like, okay, great. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for your questions. And it looks like we're good.
Thank
Thanks
you so
again.
much, Sarah. All right. Thank you so much, Sarah. Our next speaker is Kristen. So she's a senior designer, product designer at Shopify, who's helping build our marketing design system. So near and dear to my heart in terms of project work. So what can I tell you about Kristen? She's an industrial designer background. She recently came back from Nova Scotia, and you can talk to her about her trip. So she's come back refreshed and ready to speak to you about what's the topic? Yeah. I know. Yeah, building for a creative audience and balancing how we aren't, we're building for creativity versus balancing consistency. So a lot of the, I guess, battles between how do we be consistent with our design system while also catering to being creative. So welcome.
Thank you. Lucy, this is a rapid fire question. Do you like our design system?
Yes. I think there's, it's come a long way because I have history with it. I think your team has done an amazing job to get it where it is. And with all design systems, I think it's just, you build the foundational pieces, which you guys have done an incredible job of. And yeah, it's now trying to build it much better.
Oh, that was really nice. Okay, so we're going to talk about building for a creative audience, and we're focused on flexibility, creative freedom, and redefining what consistency means today. So just so I know, show of hands, who works on a design system right now or with one? Okay, so we're all together in the human experience. And who is like a designer behind one of these systems? Cool, okay, same. So I'm Kristen. I'm a senior product designer at Shopify, and I've been with the company for 2.5 years now. And I joined to work on a big redesign of Shopify.com, which was owned by a team called the Website Platform. So we own the entire website and the system behind it. And it was a big job. It was pretty gnarly. And a little bit of background, before getting to Shopify, I've always found myself working with creative audiences. Previous to this experience, I was with Super High, which is a creative community that helps people be more creative by learning how to code, by learning how to design, and managing projects. And after that, I joined Glitch, where I was, and if anyone doesn't know Glitch, it's like the cutest product in the world. You can make any app you want to, host it on their website for free. They're amazing. And I led the design system efforts for their web-based code editor. So I eventually found my way to Shopify, and literally since day one, it has been on this design system. So I guess that shows how empowering the work is. It's gnarly, but it keeps all of us really entertained and challenged on a daily basis. So what we're going to talk about today is we're going to understand Shopify's website platform design system. By the way, this is not Polaris. I'm not part of that team. This is not the same system. They're great. Who cares about consistency? Spoiler alert, I definitely do. Designing for flexibility and encouraging creative freedom. So, Shopify.com. Who's been to it? Not just our careers page, the actual website. So, it's a big, gnarly website. There's over 10,000 pages on it, some you'll never find in your life, but this is what it looks like. So, the design system behind .com is atomic base. There's around 155 developers and designers that use it, and it's a toddler. But when I say toddler, it is like at the 25-month mark. So you can tell it to walk. It will say thank you maybe sometimes, but it really is just about a year old. And this is what it looks like. A bird's eye view. It's a collection of components that can be used by our creative teams to contribute to a unified look and feel on the website. There's grids, spacing systems, colors, typography, accessibility, and more. The system ensures the value of the Shopify product and brand are communicated clearly, so more entrepreneurs can be inspired to start or scale their business with us. But we didn't always get it right, and I say that in regards to our audience, who's using this system. So full transparency, we released this system with a big redesign. And we were like, this is for the CMS crowd. It's going to be so easy for you to use. You can just pick a hero, type in it, and you'll be good. But that system was section-based, and it was rigid, and it was hard to use and break things apart and add new in. And as you can see, like designers, we weren't looking at you. And sorry, Lucy, but it was just really hard for people to use. We built a incredibly hard product. But as the world changed and the industry changed and our business needs changed, we pivoted away from a CMS and we went all in on this atomic-based approach. And we were focused on this creative audience to push Shopify by us giving them the building blocks to do so. So this design system lives in the growth organization at Shopify. And that just means we make a lot of bets and we make them quickly. And sometimes we get it wrong, but we have the space to course correct. So who is this Shopify creative audience? It's a collection of crafters from content designers, marketing, developers, and more. They span across the entire company. They're embedded on organizations like growth, core, merchant services, and enterprise product. And from what I know working with this design system, these crafters care so deeply about the quality of their work. They hold a very high bar of themselves and their teams, and they are people who will push the boundaries. They will break the rules without even knowing them because there are no rules. So we have to figure it out together. And with these teams, this is what we've promised are the benefits for them using our system. So we want to enable that their design decisions are made quickly and efficiently because we're providing them with a framework for them to create within. We want to equip these teams with the creative freedom to deliver the best possible solution every time. And we want them to evolve the library. So we bank on them doing new things that they can contribute back inward to us. But, oh, did I turn it off? No. But we don't want them to worry about the small things. We worry about all the little things so they can focus on the bigger picture because no one wants to design 20 play buttons every single month. So this is a bit of the portfolio of designers that we have contributing to the website. Maybe you've seen some of these pages. This is our Plus team. And our system inspires beyond the website. So our very own email marketing design system was created using ours as a blueprint. So now our marketing site and email surface is one cohesive journey. And here's a little screenshot. They took how we've laid out everything in our Figma file, replicated it for the surface of email, and now we're pretty connected in the two. So how can we take this design system and ensure its flexible use, encourage the creative freedom in everyone, all while maintaining consistency across the website? It's a really hard thing to do, but we have to look at the website as a product. We can't look at it as 9,000 landing pages. We can't look at it as the surface where 200 people contribute to. So when we look at the website as a product, it's easier to define things like consistency. So the good news, our Shopify creative teams are already doing this. And it took us a while to get there, but we're curious about what our neighbor is working on the website. We're looking to reuse patterns. We're striving for consistency because we struggle as creative designers when we lose it. And we'll come back to this point. So who cares about consistency? I definitely do. But maybe sometimes we care a little bit more than, say, Connor's soy candle business joining us on Shopify for the first time. Is he going to know that 20 pages look the same, or can they all be a little bit different in their own unique way, depending on the audience they're targeting? So I went on ChatGPT and I was like, what's visual consistency on a website? And this is the most basic answer I can find. So visual consistency on a website refers to the cohesive and harmonious presentation of design elements, styles, and aesthetics throughout the various pages and sections of the site. It means maintaining a unified visual language that creates a sense of familiarity and coherence for users as they navigate the website. So when you work at a really big company, it's all our problem. It's not just my problem. It is literally everyone designing on this website's problem, especially at large companies that don't have traditional corporate brand guidelines. And you'll be seeing more of those in the industry. And that's not a bad thing. If you're a crafter at heart and you value the evolution of your skill set, this is very well a place for you to grow and explore. So when it comes to building on the website, the more curious you are about the work around you, naturally the work should start to look the same. That's how trends work. Sometimes it takes being curious together as a team, one team of 5 people making something unique, or being curious alone on 1 or 2 people with a great idea to try something new. We see a lot of that variation at Shopify. So let's be clear about one thing. The goal is not to always create something no one's ever seen before. There's very well a playbook for designing performative landing pages. And there's only so many ways you can design like an FAQ section. The point is, both ways described, curiosity as a team versus curiosity alone, can be influential enough to have all of the website contributors working in the same direction. The result should be consistency, being one team going one way. So we'll start with designing for flexibility. And there's these 4 things feel good to us about how we can do that. And it's finding balance between consistency and customization, creating modular and reusable components always, adapting to different landing page and component requirements, and managing variations and exceptions. So, finding balance between consistency and customization. Does anyone lose sleep over this? Every night. Yeah, it's a hard one. So to balance these 2 things, we need to give definitions to the words, and the definitions need to feel right for the company and for the service. So one of the biggest pain points, I believe, in any design system that can bring great success if you solve it is naming, defining, and aligning together. And your language has to match your contributor's language. So consistency, what does that mean? I'll answer this on a tangible level from someone who works on the design system team. And it's my perspective as I build and roll out components. So our responsibility is to ensure all components are of quality UX, visual design, and the content across components is communicated in a clear way. Consistency is when content looks and feels the same across the website. And an example of this is I provide you with an FAQ component. We all use that FAQ component. There's no need to reimagine it in a different way unless you have a very strong reason to do so. We provide our teams with the best solution every time for their basic component needs so they can invest their time in pushing the boundaries on other things. Customization. So I had one definition before I went on vacation, and then I came back and I'm like, I could give a better one and a more simple one. So Customization, it'll happen at any company, especially with designers who are looking to, like, I don't know, be innovative. But at our company and with the website, we can give a technical definition here. And it really squashes a lot of arguments and creative discussions that can be had. So with our creative audience, it was hard for anyone to tell or define what component ended up as custom. If I change the background color, does that exist as custom? If I change the hover state, does that equal custom? You have to figure that out with your developers. So with our team, we have a scenario. I'm a designer working with a developer on a landing page to sell on TikTok. I designed something a little bit different from what's provided in the base component library. That's my team. Developer goes into Storybook, where our component library is, with the design given to them in Figma from me. In Storybook, their task is to edit the components in the settings panel to verify that it's using the design system. If they can duplicate it in Storybook, they're using the system. If the option does not exist to duplicate it in Storybook, they're making something custom. And that's okay, because if we chalk up the entire purpose of our design system into one thesis statement from the perspective of someone else using it, it's I need to compose my own sections from a consistent set of UI elements. These sections can be custom or they can be modifications to the existing, as long as we are providing them the building blocks they need to solve UX problems in a creative way. We're doing enough for them if we can give them that much. We don't want to block any teams. We don't want to say, you can't design this hero because it doesn't look like the 3 we've already provided you. If they've taken one of the 3 and they switched up a little bit, that's good enough. So with that in mind, brings us to our third point, and it's adapting to different landing page requirements. So we'll use a real component from our library. This is the testimonial component. It's probably the hottest one in the library. It's used absolutely everywhere. There's a lot of banter behind it, and it's just to show testimonials across the website for different products. But say we've provided this component and the team doesn't need the autoplay feature, or they don't need to put multiple testimonials in the carousel, and they don't want to use a series of images on the right. That's all okay. And they come to us and they say, can I actually lock it up like this? Who are we to say no? Does the content more or less say the same thing here? If their page required a larger image, maybe the testimonial quote was less important in the hierarchy, this to us is fine. You can do this because, again, the content is communicated in a clear way. Is the component accessible? Yes. Is it using elements from the library? Yes. Teams should be able to go for it. But then this is when our pile of things to do gets a little bit tall. So managing variations and exceptions. This is an important part of our job and probably takes up most of our day-to-day. It's keeping up with everything spinning up. And again, I want to bring us back, like we're in our toddler stage, so we want to go a little bit rogue right now. Like nothing's set in stone. We want to see people pushing it, and then we can dial it back when we're ready. So our best practices for managing this all is having contribution guidelines. So any designer within Shopify can contribute to the website platform design library. Our goal is to create a collaborative and constantly improving design library that can be used across the different teams and projects. And this goes from anything like a bug fix or modifying the existing. We give them a process to follow, and it makes it easier for them to do this. Next is deep collaboration. And I say deep because we can go faster together. We're all on tight timelines and have these massive projects. So if a team has an idea for a new component or wants to add a variation to an existing, we always encourage them to design with us. We make the time for them. We're capable of executing their needs so they can focus on more important things. This also allows for us to keep the design work in our Figma library super consistent by following our pattern for documentation and how we build the components and all the properties behind them. And then lastly, staying on top of documentation. at Shopify. It's tedious, but it's necessary. And here, if it's not real unless it's documented, controversial thought. But it's true. Anyways, you can use AI tools to help with documentation. Honestly, it does take away the boring part of your day. So that brings us to encouraging creative freedom. This could be a little bit subjective when you think about it. So designing for flexibility is one thing, to break apart components and make new. And we can deliver based on how we build the component. We have the control of that. Encouraging creative freedom is a whole other chapter, but we need the previous to build on this and invite this kind of effort from these designers and developers. So designing for creative freedom for us means allowing room for customization, measuring for success more holistically at this stage, and focusing on experience principles. So allowing room for customization. Historically, there was a lingering negative connotation when someone did something custom, because custom meant outside of the design system. But that wasn't necessarily true. And that just meant we as a design system team needed to double down on our education, our language that we use with other teams. If there's a negative connotation to custom, you can never encourage creativity because people will be scared to design or build something out of the box. So that'll bring us to measuring for success. Previously, we measured for success on a component level, like, are they using it? That's great. 10 people used it. It looks great. If they customize the component less and less or barely touched it, we were like, great, we provided the perfect thing. But that's not a good metric. That just meant that, I don't know, people couldn't break things apart because we didn't make it easy for them to break things apart. So at this stage, we take a step back and we measure for success more holistically. And it's at the level of, is this library working for people? And I saw this graphic the other day, and I don't remember the author, but I can find it, where they take these 6 themes: productivity, coverage, efficiency, satisfaction, consistency, and quality, and they ask themselves each question within the theme. We hadn't been asking ourselves any of these questions, and we hadn't been focused on any of these themes. We were focused on, is this the best component in the world, and is it sophisticated enough so no one ever changes it? But take a step back, look at the people using it. Are they having a good time using it? If they're not, we need to think about this harder and provide a better solution, or let them provide the solution. And lastly, focusing on experience principles. So with a creative audience, creatives love briefs, right? Like, you can be given a brief and it's like, make a campaign for like St. Patrick's Day, but make it purple. And they're like, sick, I can do that. So if you apply experience principles to the website, to the platform as a product, they can use that as a brief. They can create their landing pages based on those guardrails that you're providing. So just as an example, in the case of the website, imagine you've just been tasked with creating a product detail page on the website. You understand who your audience is and what you're required to deliver, but you want to understand how your landing page relates to those around you. So I put up these 4 principles just as examples, and you can tell them optimize for user goals. So how and when we present Shopify's value at a micro level and macro level should be directly informed by user goals at all times. Find the appropriate tone for visual and verbal language to support the user goals' specific needs to the level of scale. That's one example. Detail on demand. Optimize for most users most of the time. It's a hard thing to do, but it's a pretty good challenge. It means design for everyone most of the time, and make sure their core needs are met before guiding them towards the next step. Another example, engender trust and confidence. In order for visitors to choose Shopify, they must see us as a credible, competent, and trustworthy company. So be clear and direct and consistent about communicating information that is important to our visitors and our business. And lastly, visual expression meets product clout. So reflect Shopify's leadership and impact in commerce through a bold, innovative, and grounded visual and verbal language that stands out in our competitive landscape. So you can apply these principles to every single landing page on the website today and those to come in the future. And this all works towards consistency. If we're following the same principles, if we're following the same trends as the neighbors around us, we should be going in the same direction. And that takes a lot of trust to get there. We're not slapping anyone's hands being like, that's wrong, that's not Shopify. You work at Shopify. You should decide if it's Shopify. If you know the product really well and you feel connected to the brand in some way, you'll make the right decision. And as a design system team, you need to trust that people will make the right decision. So, my parting words, don't overcomplicate things. Give yourself grace in your everyday because a simple solution takes highly complex problem solving. And acknowledge all the good and gnarly that comes with the system you're designing. At the end of the day, dream teams will always move forward and create things for others to do their best work. That's all I got.
Thank you so much. And now for questions and answers if you're ready. And if you're ready, then I will run to you. Raise your hand if you're ready. If not, I will break the ice. Someone else did.
Hey, I didn't frame my question very well, but I'll try. How the workflow of CMS contributors or developers had been impacted with this change that you guys made, like encouraging new creativity and customization had any impact on other people's experience or workflows?
Yeah, I mean, there's always a risk when you focus on a new audience. And that risk was we're no longer going to cater to the people who would use a CMS. There's no CMS anymore. Therefore, these growth marketers, these SEO teams, they need to find development resource and design resource to contribute to the website. By doing that and us focus on design developers, we kind of retain a higher quality of the website because we're controlling the work that we build rather than a CMS shooting out all these pages. So it was a trade-off. We're just not focused on them and there's no product to support them. But we believe our trade-off was the right thing to do.
Hi. It sounds like on the scale of customization, you guys are a lot closer to the highly customizable end rather than Wealthsimple. And what does that look like in practice? Like in, say, Storybook, for any given component, will we find 5, 10, 15, 20 variations? Or how do you keep that in check? And, well, I mean, I know that your talk was exactly about that, but
No, I just cry when I see all that. No, I'm kidding. So in the first version of the library that we put out, there were like hundreds of variations for all of the base components. So say we put out 20 base components, we would see honestly like 15 to 30 variations per that. Then we were like, whoa, this is not sustainable at all, right? That's a huge backlog. So in the version 2 of the library, we changed the way we built it. So we got rid of everyone's previous variations, broke all those base components down to atomic level. And if it's atomic level, it'll all still be within that same library. It's not going to be this button is spun off because we changed the hover state. So the way we built it canceled out all those snowflakes. That's what we used to call them. And they're just part of the system now.
Right up.
Hi. You mentioned that documentation was really important in all these practices. I'm just curious about like the tactical hows of working in Storybook, and then I'm guessing some kind of design documentation. Like how did that all intersect?
Yeah, so the first iteration we put out, we didn't have time to document anything. We just sent something out into the wild, and then the best happened, which was a very successful redesign, and the worst happened, which was the backlog of all the variations that spun up. So When we cleaned up our library, which was recent, we focused on developer docs first, getting them set up because the developers were suffering the most with what we put out. Their documentation matches ours in Figma. And the way we set it up is we give a purpose for the component. We show them how they can pull it in to their repos and how to build their pages. But it's on a very basic level right now because we don't want to overwhelm with information. We want people just to get started. So our level of documentation, I would say, is that like a level 2. Maybe by the end of the year, we can beef it up with even more, but it's very bare bone right now. Intentionally so.
Can I just add to that? Like, from my user perspective, the design documentation naming of each component matches what it's in Storybook. And also our designers are like, they're in Storybook, looking at the components, seeing how, like, what the variations can be. And so we're educating they're educating themselves on how it can be built so that, yeah, there's no, I guess, discrepancies between design and development.
Yeah, it's kind of like we've given a menu and we actually pointed our designers to the development resource first. We were like, we'll know you'll be capable in Figma, but just go to Storybook first and see how our folders are structured, read the names, and see what's available to you. Then come back in Figma, and they were able to bridge a closer connection between the two sources.
Thank you.
Just one question regarding developer like ease of life. Do you maintain like a component development kit to make sure developers have the tools to contribute back to the component library?
Now we do, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Ease of life, though.
And
I'm kidding.
is that something you publish for like public use so others can leverage?
No, so this library wouldn't be public use.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
Hey, lovely presentation, by the way. Just to follow up with her question about documentation. So what's your process like with handoff and version control between the design documentation and the development documentation?
Mm-hmm. So we're a really tight team. Like there's 2 designers and 1 developer positioned on this library for over 200 people using it. Like some days you can get 200 love notes from people and the other day is bad. But how do we just work really closely async, like on a daily basis. We'll pick 3 components to really invest in the quality of it and finish it beginning to end between the 3 of us. So every week we'll pump out like 6 really good quality components and do the same the next week. Is it the most sustainable process or handoff method? No, no, but it got our library to a really good place. And again, we believe that that was the investment we needed to make so these teams could move quicker because we were stalling them. We needed to clean up our shop, and that's just the rate we were working.
Thank you.
Hi, I had a question about what you just said. So, timeline, essentially, where it's like when you're working on such a large design system, what is the timeline that you give yourself or like is given to you to work on it? And also, how do you prioritize which components to work on first?
Yeah. I mean, at Shopify, it feels like the timeline is always like yesterday. Like we needed this yesterday. How we prioritize it with the platform, we found ourselves in lucky situations where the design team could buy time. So our tech backlog and debt was so high that we could take 2 to 3 weeks at a time and just clean up that Figma and be ready when they were available to us. But what that taught us is even if a design team can buy time because their developers are tied up, the product is never going to be as good as it can be if you're working siloed like that. It could get you a little bit ahead, but at the end of the day, there's so much compromise you need to do on these components, and you have to be side by side. How much time we give ourselves? We could probably give ourselves a little bit more time. Like when we prioritize our components, we have to see that it's in demand. So we have a contributors channel where people bring up their issues or things they need us to review their PRs on. And if we see like, oh, someone's been talking about the testimonial component like steady for 4 weeks, have we touched it? We'll go back and we'll tackle the component that's most in use. We could use your tools to tell us which component.
Whoever shouts the
Give us
loudest.
a list.
Yeah, thank you. Adding to that question, how long did it take you from the start to a good place? Like, how long did that take your team to do?
Oh, so I would say we spent all. Okay, so the last 6 months of last year, we built a CMS focused design library, and it took us those 6 months to design and build it end to end and ship a whole redesign.com. To clean up that mess and get us to a good place. It was February up until last week before I went on vacation. We were like, we cleaned it up. It's better now. You love atomic libraries. So I feel like 6 months, depending on the team structure and like what skills people have available to offer that library, 6.
Question over here.
Hi, I just want to ask, is there any tips or practices on how to use AI to help documentation?
Oh, I have so many good prompts. I'm on that thing all day. How how to use it? You know what? I feel like developers are actually a little more sophisticated with bringing in ChatGPT to how they write out content, and that's how I learned. I was like, what are you asking that thing? And he's like, no, just it's a template. You can set up your prompt and it'll pump you out a template that shows you an overview of the component, how to get it set up, what language we're using. And I was like, okay, maybe I can use that same structure and apply it to the documentation in Figma. And that's when I'll ask it questions like, what's the purpose of a testimonial component? But then I get really specific and I'm like, okay, what's a testimonial component that needs to use autoplay and link out to a blog and da 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 da. So just practice your writing, write out 10 different ways to ask one question, and eventually you're going to get a good response and you'll be able to use it. But always edit the work. I mean, the responses are not always perfect. You got to read it again. And in our case, you need to make it sound a little bit more human for creatives to be like, okay, was this a robot or was this Kristen? So I added like a little emoji here and there. Just practice your writing. It's important.
Hi, I really like the design system that you just described. I also work in the design system, and for us, key question right now, design tokens, right? I just wondering, do you also have design tokens? How do you manage the connection between the Figma and code and to keep the consistency?
Yeah. So we have tokens implemented, but we're in a gray area because we're thinking about theming. And that's directly tied to our tokens. For example, we have our base tokens, which are just the standard colors you applied to light and dark mode and our typography, all that. But then we have themes coming up, which you can create a theme for, say, Shopify Plus. So we're kind of redefining how we want to build tokens in our library because I don't think we have the right solution now to support all these different like mini identities that are spinning up.
Hey, you mentioned in the beginning you are not building Polaris, and that means different. But how much consistency did you have to maintain between product design system and marketing design system in organization?
Wait, can you rephrase that?
If I call Polaris as a product design system and I see this as a marketing design system, how much consistency did you have to maintain between the two design systems in the company?
Oh, okay. So they're not at all related. There's nothing that we share from them. There's actually a really cool lesson I learned when joining Shopify, and it was the admin so the admin is the product, right, where people go in and they sell their stuff. So the admin can influence outward. It can influence marketing design. It can influence visual design. The marketing and visual design should not influence inward. So therefore, anything that we do, you probably won't see it in the admin unless it's like an ad that has a gradient. But yeah, so they're not at all related.
Very nice. I'll close this off with a thought experiment for you. This so-called toddler of a design system, right? Do you foresee its future sort of treading that line between gatekeeping and creative exploration and openness? Or do you feel like there's a desired end goal on that spectrum?
I don't think this design system will ever gatekeep it. I think this design system will be something open and rogue for a little bit longer. I think we need to ask ourselves, one, are people using it or are they using it as inspiration? And if it's as inspiration, what's the value of this design system? That would need a rethink. So yeah, it's going to be an open rogue website, and I think for good reason. We have to push it. If we're not pushing a system, then it's just going to stay stagnant and every website's going to look the same.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Give it up for Kristen. And now, closing slides. This one says, stay tuned. You know, meetup.com, designsystems.community, follow us there. And thank you so much for attending. That is a survey. I really hope you fill it out with your phone camera thingies. There's also a bit.ly link at the bottom. You can follow us on social and keep up with Design Systems Community Toronto. Thank you so much for joining us today, and have fun.